The red velvet rope was more than a barrier. It was a judgment. Tonight, at the biggest tech gala of the year, Audra Kendrick was publicly barred by the one man who knew she deserved to be inside, her ex-husband, Ashton Lowe. He stood just feet away, draped in a smug smile and a new girlfriend, watching as security read Audra's name from the blocked list. The whispers from the city's elite started instantly. He meant to humiliate her, to erase her from the company she helped build. But he forgot one critical detail. A detail security was about to announce to the entire room. The Zenith Tower cut into the Chicago night sky like a shard of obsidian. Tonight, its observation deck and grand ballroom, spaces usually reserved for silent, panoramic views of the city, were transformed. This was the Celestial Gala, the launch event for Aura Core Innovations' new biometric platform, Aegis. To the press, it was the social and tech event of the season. To Audra Kendrick, it was a declaration of war. She stepped out of the black sedan, the click of her silver heels on the granite plaza sounding impossibly loud. Her dress was a sheath of midnight blue, sleeveless and severe, a stark contrast to the glittering, sequined masses. She wore her dark hair pulled back in a tight chignon, revealing the cold, brilliant diamond studs at her ears, the last gift her father ever gave her. She was not here to blend in. She was here to be seen. Audra clutched her small, hard-shell purse. Inside, past the lipstick and the single key to her downtown condo, was a folded piece of paper. It was a simple, notarized proxy document, but it felt heavier than a brick. It was her armor. She walked past the flashing bulbs of the paparazzi, ignoring the shouted questions. They didn't recognize her. Not yet. For the past decade, she had been Mrs. Ashton Lowe, the quiet, supportive background wife. The press had always preferred Ashton's camera-ready smile and his fabricated origin story of solitary genius. She reached the main entrance. A bottleneck of Chicago's wealthiest formed a glittering pool around the velvet ropes, all holding their embossed invitations. Audra didn't have one. She saw him immediately. Ashton Lowe, her ex-husband, holding court just inside the lobby. He was tailored to perfection in a custom Brioni tuxedo, his smile as wide and shallow as ever. Hanging from his arm was Beatrice, the 24-year-old PR assistant he'd sworn was just a colleague. Beatrice dripped in borrowed diamonds, her laughter high and sharp. Audra took a deep breath, smelling the expensive perfume and cold ambition in the air, and stepped forward to the security checkpoint. A broad-shouldered man in a black suit, Mr. Hines, held up a polite hand. "Invitation, ma'am?" "I don't have one," Audra said, her voice steady. "I'm Audra Kendrick. I should be on the executive list." Mr. Hines frowned, tapping his tablet. He scrolled, then scrolled again. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't have an Audra Kendrick on the guest list." "That can't be right," Audra said, keeping her voice level. "Please check again. It might be under Kendrick or Lowe. She was my wife." Ashton's voice boomed, oily and familiar. The crowd quieted. Ashton and Beatrice glided over, their faces a perfect rehearsed mask of concern. "Audra, what are you doing?" Ashton murmured, just loud enough for the dozen people nearest the rope to hear. This is just sad." Beatrice stifled a giggle, hiding it behind a perfectly manicured hand. "Ashton, honey, maybe she's confused. The divorce was finalized, right?" "Audra Kendrick," Mr. Hines said again, his voice now flat. He tapped the screen one more time, switching to a different list. His posture stiffened. "Ah, yes. I do have your name, ma'am." Relief washed over Audra for a split second, until she saw the pity in the guard's eyes. "It's on the restricted list," Hines said, his voice dropping. Mr. Lowe has explicitly barred you from the premises. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. The words hit her like a physical blow. Barred. He hadn't just not invited her. He had taken the active, malicious step of putting her name, the name of the woman who co-founded the company with him, on a list of threats, alongside stalkers and disgruntled ex-employees. The whispers erupted. That's her? The first wife? My God, how desperate, crashing her own husband's party. Ex-husband, another corrected. Well, now we see why he left her. Clearly unhinged. Penelope Dunn, the city's most venomous society columnist, was scribbling furiously in a little black notepad, her eyes alight. Ashton leaned in, his cologne suffocating. Listen to me, he hissed, the smile gone. You are embarrassing yourself. You are not Aura Core. You were never Aura Core. You signed the papers. You took the money. It's over. Go home, Audra. You bastard, Audra whispered, the fury finally breaking through her composure. This company was my idea, that Aegis platform. That's my code, my architecture. A contribution, darling, Beatrice cooed, stepping in front of Ashton, which, as I recall, the settlement more than covered. Security? She waved a dismissive hand at Mr. Hines. Please remove her. She's making the other guests uncomfortable. Audra looked at the faces around her, people who had been to her home, eaten her food, praised her partnership with Ashton for years. Not a single one met her eye. They were all captivated by the drama, siding with the man who held the power. Ma'am, Mr. Hines said, his voice firm but not unkind. Please, don't make me call the police. The police? Audra repeated, the word tasting like ash. You would have me arrested? She looked directly at Ashton. His eyes were cold, dead. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod to the guard. He was going to do it. He was going to have her dragged out of the building she had helped build, in front of the entire Chicago business world. This was the final erasure. No, Audra said, straightening her spine. The terror evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp resolve. I will not be leaving. She looked past Ashton, past the smirking Beatrice, and fixed her gaze on the guard, Mr. Hines. You have made a mistake, she said, her voice ringing with an authority that made the guard pause. Ashton Lowe is a guest at this event. A key guest, I'll grant you, but he does not have the authority to bar anyone. Ashton laughed. Oh, Audra, this is pathetic. I am the CEO. I am the chairman of the board. My authority is absolute. No, Ashton, it's not, Audra said. She reached into her purse. Mr. Hines, I am not on your guest list because I am not a guest. I am not on your restricted list because the man who wrote it is merely an employee. She pulled out the folded paper. I am Audra Kendrick, and I am the majority stockholder and beneficial owner of Aura Core Innovations. I own this building. And you, she said, her eyes landing on her ex-husband, are trespassing. A dead, perfect silence fell over the lobby. Ashton's face, which had been a mask of smug pity, turned a sickly, mottled white. What? What did you say? Ashton stammered. Audra ignored him. She looked at Mr. Hines, who was frozen, staring at the document she held out. Mr. Hines, Audra said clearly, my legal counsel, from the firm of Sidley Austin, informed your head of security, Mr. Frank Doyle, of the ownership transfer at 9 a.m. this morning. I suggest you call him. Now. It hadn't always been this way. 12 years ago, Aura Core wasn't a billion-dollar titan in a glass tower. It was a cluster of overheating servers in the spare bedroom of their first apartment in Wicker Park. And Audra hadn't been a ghost. She had been the machine. She'd met Ashton Lowe at a Northwestern University mixer. She was a quiet, intense graduate student in computer science, already deep into her thesis on predictive biometric security. He was a charismatic, handsome MBA student who could sell sand in the Sahara. He was drawn to her brilliance. She was drawn to his light. He made her feel seen. He made her feel, for the first time, that her complex, esoteric ideas could have a place in the real world. "You're the architect, Addie," he used to say, his arms slung around her shoulders as they looked at her whiteboards, which were covered in algorithms. "I'm just the salesman. We're a team." The idea for Aura Core, then just a vague concept called Aegis, was hers. It was born from her thesis, a system that didn't just rely on a fingerprint or a retinal scan, but on the unique, predictive patterns of a user's behavior. How they typed, how they held their phone, the microsecond hesitations in their gestures. It was a living, breathing security net. Ashton was the one who saw its commercial application. "This isn't just for a doctorate, Addie," he'd said, his eyes gleaming. "This is for everything. Banking, defense, data. This is a billion-dollar idea." He convinced her to drop out, just shy of her PhD. He registered the LLC, naming himself CEO and her head of product development. It seemed logical at the time. "You build it, I'll sell it," he'd promised. "We'll be 50-50 partners, always." They married 6 months later at City Hall. The 50-50 promise was never put on paper. It was sealed with a kiss and a vow. For the first 5 years, it was perfect. They were the classic startup story. They ate cheap pizza, slept in 2-hour shifts, and lived on adrenaline and coffee. Audra coded. She built the Aegis prototype from the ground up, her fingers flying across keyboards, often working 72 hours straight to hit a deadline for a venture capital pitch. Ashton, in his one good suit, took her work and charmed the money out of Silicon Valley and Wall Street. And he was good at it. He translated her dense, technical genius into a language investors understood: profit, growth, and market disruption. Aura Core, led by visionary Ashton Lowe, the first major tech journal profile read. Audra was mentioned in the final paragraph. "Mr. Lowe is supported by a dedicated product team, headed by his wife, Audra." When she'd pointed it out, hurt, he'd laughed. "Darling, it's just PR. They need a face. You hate this stuff. You want to be in front of a camera or in front of your code? I'm taking the hits for you. We both know you're the magic." She believed him. The money came in. First millions, then tens of millions. They moved out of the apartment and into a Lincoln Park brownstone. The servers moved into a sleek, dedicated office. Ashton hired a team of developers to support Audra. But they weren't there to support her. They were there to replace her. Ashton, now the polished CEO, began to distance her from her own creation. "Addie, the new guys can handle the kernel patches. I need you focused on big picture ideas." Then, "The investors are getting nervous that our core tech is still so siloed. We need you to document everything for continuity." And finally, "The board feels, and I agree, that your head of product title is a bit outdated. You're the founder's wife. We're creating a new role for you. Chief Innovation Advisor. You'll be above the day-to-day. You've earned it." Chief Innovation Advisor was a title without a team, without a budget, and without a key card to the server room. She had been exiled to the 40th floor, to a beautiful corner office with a stunning view, where she was expected to do nothing. She was 34 years old, a multimillionaire on paper, and utterly, profoundly obsolete within her own company. Ashton's excuses were smooth. "The board needs a formal hierarchy, Addie. It's not personal." But it was personal. He had grown to resent the one person in the world who knew he was a fraud. He was the visionary, and he couldn't stand to be reminded that the vision had never been his. Then came Beatrice. Audra had seen it coming for months. The late-night, bored dinners. The sudden, constant texting. The way Ashton, who had always been meticulous, suddenly smelled of a new perfume. Something young and cheap. The divorce proceedings were a masterclass in cruelty. Ashton and his battalion of lawyers from Rawlings and Coyle painted her as a bitter, unstable woman, jealous of her husband's success. They used her advisor title against her. Mrs. Lowe hasn't contributed a single line of code to the Aegis platform in over 4 years. Ashton's lead attorney, a shark named Porter, had sneered in mediation. She has been handsomely compensated for a no-show job, a courtesy extended by Mr. Lowe out of respect for their shared history. They argued that her initial work, the entire foundation of the company, was work for hire, legally owned by the corporation, of which Ashton was the CEO and majority shareholder. Audra's lawyer, a green, overwhelmed associate she'd hired in a daze, had been steamrolled. They offered her a settlement, $20 million or the brownstone, and a non-disclosure agreement so ironclad it forbade her from ever saying the word or a core in a professional context again. 20 million, she had whispered, horrified. The company, on the verge of launching Aegis, was valued at over $3 billion. It's a generous offer, Audra, Ashton had told her privately, checking his watch. Take it, or I'll drag this out, and I'll paint you as mentally unfit. I'll leak your erratic emails to the press. You'll get nothing. Be smart. Sign the paper. She signed it. It felt like cutting off her own arm. She was exhausted, heartbroken, and humiliated. She just wanted it to be over. She took the money and disappeared. She bought a sterile, modern condo in a building where no one knew her name. She spent the first 3 months in a haze of grief. She had lost her husband, her life's work, and her name, all in one motion. Then, one rainy Tuesday, she was cleaning out a box of old college memorabilia. Tucked inside a tattered copy of her graduate thesis, she found a document. It was a single, folded sheet of canary yellow legal paper, the seed funding agreement from her father, Robert Kendrick, a quiet man, an electrical engineer who had run his own small, successful firm. He had been the one to give them their first check. $100,000. It was almost all he had. I believe in you, Addie, he'd said, handing her the check. This one, Ashton, he's a salesman. You be sure he's selling your product, not you. Ashton had been in a hurry to get the money and had signed the simple contract Robert had drafted without a second glance. Audra had forgotten all about it. It wasn't a loan. It was a convertible note. Her father, sensing Ashton's ambition, had put in a clause, a dilution protection and transferal clause. It stated that if Audra's personal stake in the company, which Ashton had registered as 0% in his 50-50 promise, was ever involuntarily or coercively zeroed out prior to an IPO, the note would convert, not to $100,000 in stock. It would convert to a 51% controlling interest in the parent LLC. Ashton's chief innovation advisor scam, the legal maneuver that had pushed her out and zeroed her stake to force the settlement, had been the very thing that triggered her father's trap. The divorce didn't matter. The settlement didn't matter. The NDA was void. For a full minute, Audra just sat on the floor, the yellow paper shaking in her hand. Then she stood up, walked to her laptop, and Googled Best Corporate Litigators in Chicago. She hired Ms. Shapiro, a woman who looked like a librarian, but had the killer instinct of a great white shark. For the last 6 months, they had been moving in silence. They executed the conversion through a series of shell companies to avoid detection. They let Ashton, drunk on his own success, launch the Celestial Gala. They let him finalize the Aegis platform, pouring millions into her company. They let him put her name on the blocked list. They had waited for the moment of his greatest, most public triumph to pull the pin. And that moment was now. The lobby of the Zenith Tower had become a tomb. The only sound was the faint, frantic tapping of Penelope Dunn's stiletto on the marble floor. Ashton's face cycled through a nauseating series of colors, from white to red to a sickly, pale green. "That's insane," he whispered, the words catching in his throat. "You're lying! That note. That was a loan. I paid your father back, with interest." "You paid him back," Audra agreed, her voice as cold and clear as the diamonds at her ears. "But he never cashed the check. He knew you'd try to erase the paper trail. The note, however, was never a loan. It was a convertible note. And you, Ashton, triggered the conversion clause when your lawyers filed the motion that zeroed out my founder's stake. You did it to win a divorce settlement. You handed me the entire company." Mr. Hines, the security guard, had not moved. His face was a mask of professional neutrality, but his eyes were wide. He was still holding his earpiece. "Call him," Audra commanded, not breaking eye contact with Ashton. "Call Frank Doyle." "Hines, don't you dare!" Ashton snapped, his voice a pathetic mix of command and panic. "I am your boss. You will remove this woman. That is a direct order." Hines looked from the sweating, apoplectic CEO to the impossibly calm woman in the blue dress. He had a mortgage. He had 2 kids. He also had a 20-year career in security, and he knew a predator when he saw one. And he also knew when the predator had just become the prey. He made his choice. He pressed his earpiece. "Mr. Doyle, this is Hines at the lobby checkpoint. I have a situation. A Ms. Audra Kendrick is here claiming ownership. She references a 9 a.m. notification from Sidley Austin regarding a majority transfer." A pause. The entire lobby seemed to lean in. Ashton was visibly shaking, his hand clamped on Beatrice's arm so tightly she winced. Hines listened. His shoulders, which had been tense, suddenly relaxed. His posture, which had been subservient to Ashton, straightened into something new, something respectful. He dropped his hand from the earpiece and looked, not at Ashton, but directly at Audra. His expression was one of dawning, profound respect. "My apologies, ma'am," Hines said. The change in title was an earthquake. "Mr. Doyle confirms. He is in his office with your legal team now. He says the notification this morning was ironclad. We were given a different directive by Mr. Lowe, which was a clear overreach of his authority." Hines took a deep breath. He reached for the heavy brass clip on the red velvet rope. Clip. The sound was as loud as a gunshot in the silent room. He unhooked the rope and pulled it back, creating a wide, open path for her. "Please come in," Hines said, his voice now a low, respectful baritone. He then looked over his shoulder at the stunned, furious face of Ashton Lowe. "Ma'am, do you need us to remove Mr. Lowe?" This was the moment. The "do you need us to remove Mr. Lowe" was the killing blow. It was the complete, public, and total reversal of power. Ashton looked as if Hines had just punched him in the stomach. "Remove? Me? Are you insane? Hines, you're fired. I am the CEO. I built this." "No," Audra said, taking her first step across the threshold. She glided past the rope, the scent of her simple, sharp perfume cutting through the cloud of Ashton's cologne. She stopped in front of him. "You didn't build this, Ashton. I did. You just put your name on the door." She turned. Beatrice, who had been silent, looked terrified. She was a child caught in an avalanche. "Honey," Beatrice whispered, tugging on Ashton's arm. "Ashton, do something. This is that columnist, Penelope. Everyone is watching." "Oh, I know," Audra said, her voice laced with ice. She looked at the young woman. "You must be Beatrice, the colleague." She didn't wait for a reply. She looked back at Hines. "Mr. Hines, you are not fired. You are, in fact, promoted. As of this moment, you are the acting head of security for the Zenith Tower. Congratulations. Your first official duty," she said, nodding toward Beatrice, "is to please escort this guest off the premises. Her access is revoked." Beatrice's face crumpled. "What? No, Ashton! Tell her! You can't let her do this!" Ashton was a statue, his mind broken. He couldn't process the new reality. "Ma'am," Hines said, his voice now full of gravelly authority. He motioned to two other guards. "Please come with us." "No, get your hands off me!" Beatrice shrieked, as they gently but firmly took her by the arms. "I'm with Ashton Lowe. I'm... "You're leaving," Hines said flatly. As Beatrice was escorted out, her sobs echoing on the marble, Audra turned her attention back to her ex-husband. The crowd was a wall of phones, all recording. "Audra," Ashton stammered, his hands raised. "Audra, please, don't do this. We can talk about this. The valuation, the launch. You're destroying the company, our company." "It was never our company, Ashton. You made that clear in mediation," she said. She didn't go toward the ballroom. She didn't go for the champagne. She walked, with a purpose she hadn't felt in years, toward the private executive elevator, the one that required a special biometric scan to open, the one Ashton had programmed to deny her, even when she was his wife. She stopped in front of the sleek black panel. Ashton let out a broken, desperate laugh. "See? You can't even get in. You need my fingerprint. It's all tied to me. You're still locked out, Audra. You're still..." Audra ignored him. She looked at Hines. "I assume my legal team was thorough?" Hines nodded. "Yes, ma'am. As of 9:01 a.m. this morning, your biometrics were registered as the primary administrator for the entire building. Mr. Lowe's access was downgraded to guest." Audra raised her hand and placed it on the scanner. There was a soft, green ching. The elevator doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss. She stepped inside the glass and steel car. She looked out at Ashton, a broken man in a perfect suit, standing humiliated in the lobby he thought was his. "Audra!" he yelled, lunging forward, but Hines put a firm hand on his chest. "Audra, you bitch! You can't do this! You'll regret this!" Audra met his eyes. She gave him a small, sad and final smile. "No, Ashton," she said, as the doors began to close. "You did this. You just forgot to read the fine print." The doors slid shut, sealing her in and locking him out, reflecting his apoplectic, screaming face back at himself. The elevator ascended with silent, terrifying speed. Audra didn't watch the city lights blur past. She watched her own reflection in the mirrored steel. The woman staring back at her was not the ghost who had signed the divorce papers. This was someone new, or perhaps someone very, very old. The elevator chimed and the doors opened on the 50th floor. The war room. This was the nerve center for the Aegis launch. The room was awash of blue light from 36 monitors, all displaying data streams, press feeds, and security protocols. A team of 20 high-level engineers and marketing VPs were buzzing, headsets on, pizza boxes open on a side table. They were all focused on a large countdown clock on the main screen. T-30. They were about to take the company public. The launch wasn't just a party, it was the start of their IPO. A man in a crisp shirt, his tie loosened, looked up as the elevator doors opened. He was David Shaw, the Vice President of Engineering. He had been one of Audra's first junior hires, a bright-eyed kid from MIT. He was a good man, but he was Ashton's man now. "Mom," David said, his brow furrowing in confusion. "This floor is restricted. The gala is downstairs. I don't know how you got up here." Audra walked past him, her heels clicking. She walked directly to the main console. She could feel the hum of the servers through the floor. It was the language she had never forgotten. "Hello, David," she said. She placed her purse on the console. "The launch is on hold." The room's excited chatter died instantly. "What? Did she say on hold?" David Shaw stepped forward, his face panicked. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you can't be in here. This is a secure environment. And on hold? The launch is locked. We go live in 30 minutes. Mr. Lowe is about to take the stage." "Mr. Lowe has been relieved of his duties," Audra said, her voice cutting through the room. She sat down in the main command chair. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. It was like a concert pianist returning to her Steinway. "I am shutting it down." "You can't," David said, his voice rising. "Audra, Mrs. Lowe, Ms. Kendrick, you don't understand. We have billions in pre-launch contracts. The SEC filing is set. You don't just stop an IPO. You'll kill the company. You'll wipe out all of us." "I'm not here to kill the company, David," Audra said, her fingers beginning to move. She wasn't just typing. She was conducting. She navigated through Ashton's sleek, unfamiliar user interface, diving into the source code, the digital DNA that was hers. "I'm here to save it." The team was frozen, watching in a mixture of horror and awe. She was moving through their most secure firewalls like they were made of paper. "Who," she murmured, "is Project Tantalus?" A young engineer in the back, a woman with bright purple hair, flinched. That's Mr. Lowe's private protocol," the engineer said, her voice small. "I'm Maya. I'm the one who built the final compiler." He said it was a golden key for investors, a failsafe in case of a hostile takeover, so the board could retrieve the core data. "A golden key," Audra repeated, her fingers flying faster. The code scrolled across the main screen. "This isn't a golden key, Maya. This is a data siphon." She hit a command. A new window opened, displaying a schematic. It was a live data map. "He's mirroring," Audra whispered, the cold reality dawning. "This protocol, it doesn't just retrieve data. It makes a copy. A perfect, mirrored copy of all Aegis user data. Your typing patterns, your biometrics, your entire digital life, and routes it to a secondary, private server." She traced the IP. A server in the Cayman Islands, registered to a shell corporation. The room was silent. David Shaw looked like he was going to be sick. He was going to sell it," David breathed. "All of it. Our users' private data." "No," Audra said, the final, horrific piece of the puzzle locking into place. "Not just sell it. He was going to sell me, my architecture, my life's work. He built a back door into my system to turn it into the world's most sophisticated data theft tool." She looked up, her eyes burning. "This," she said, her voice shaking with a cold, righteous fury, "was why he divorced me. This was why he humiliated me. This was why I was barred from the building." She pointed to the screen. "He wasn't afraid of a bitter ex-wife. He was afraid of the architect, He was terrified I'd come to his party, take one look at his masterpiece, and see this filth that he'd hidden inside my work. The countdown clock read T-21. "All right," Audra said, her voice steel. She was no longer a ghost. She was the god in the machine. "Maya!" she snapped. "Yes, Mom." Maya was at her side in an instant, a laptop in her hands. "Get me a direct line to the server core, not the interface, the core. I'm going to rip this Tantalus's protocol out by the roots, and I'm going to use its own pathways to find out who he was selling to." "Yes, Ma'am." "David, here." He had grabbed a phone. "Get my general counsel, Ms. Shapiro, on the line. She's in the building. Tell her to meet me on the 50th floor. And tell her to bring Mr. Hines, the new head of security. Tell them to detain anyone who tries to leave this floor, or enter it." "Enter it?" David asked. Just then, the private elevator chimed. "Too late," Audra said, not looking up from the code. "He's here." The elevator doors slid open. But it wasn't Ashton. It was Ms. Shapiro, her calm, librarian-like face a mask of determination. She was flanked by Mr. Hines and two of his most formidable-looking guards. "We heard you were having a party," Ms. Shapiro said dryly, holding up a phone. "I've been listening. You're on speaker with the rest of the board. They are appalled." Audra nodded, her fingers still flying. "Status on Ashton?" "Detained," Hines growled. "He and Mr. Doyle, the former head of security, are in the 40th floor boardroom. They thought they were having a legal strategy meeting. My men are outside the door. They're not going anywhere." "Good," Audra said. "David, get the lights. Shut down the gala." "What?" David said. "The party? The press. The investors. They're all downstairs. I'm not doing this in secret. I'm not cleaning up his mess in the dark. Turn on the main auditorium feed. I want everyone to see." "See what?" "The truth," Audra said. She typed one final command and hit enter. Down in the grand ballroom, the giant 30-foot screen that was supposed to display Ashton's triumphant face flickered. The Aura Core logo was replaced by the raw, black and green text of a code compiler. The music died. The babble of the crowd faded. A new voice filled the room. Audra's. "Good evening," her voice echoed, amplified from the war room. "My name is Audra Kendrick, and I apologize for the interruption, but I am the architect of the Aegis platform, and I've just discovered a critical security flaw." In the 40th floor boardroom, Ashton Lowe, watching a live feed on his phone, went pale. She wouldn't. "What you are looking at," Audra's voice continued as she projected the Tantalus's code for the entire gala to see, "is a back door, a data siphon, a malicious piece of code inserted by your CEO, Ashton Lowe, to steal your information." The gala was in chaos. People were shouting. Penelope Dunn was standing on a chair, filming with her phone. "Mr. Lowe intended to sell your biometric data to the highest bidder," Audra said. "The launch is cancelled, the IPO is suspended, and Mr. Lowe is indisposed." In the war room, Audra finally spun her chair around. "Ms. Shapiro?" "The board has just concluded an emergency vote," Shapiro said, her voice grim. "Ashton Lowe is removed as CEO, effective immediately, pending criminal investigation. The board has also voted unanimously to appoint you as interim CEO." "Interim," Audra said. "A formality," Shapiro smiled. "They're not idiots. They need you." The elevator chimed again. This time Ashton stumbled out, flanked by two of Hines's men. He was disheveled, his tuxedo tie undone. He had clearly fought them. "Audra!" he roared, a wild animal cornered. "You're lying. You're a bitter ex-wife. Sabotage. You did this. You..." You put that code there yourself to frame me. Audra stood up, walking calmly toward him. That's a very serious allegation, Ashton, she said. It's true. You've hated me since the divorce. You've been planning this. You can't prove I did it. You're right, Audra said. I can't. Ashton paused, a flicker of hope in his wild eyes. What? I don't have to. Audra pointed to the main console, where Maya was now typing. My system can. What are you talking about? The Aegis protocol, Audra said. The real one, buried beneath your junk code. It's a predictive biometric system, remember? It learns its user. It knows how I type. It knows how David types. And it knows how you type. The system I designed has been logging every change, every keystroke, from every user since its inception. It's a security net, Ashton. It's what I do. Maya hit a key. A new window opened, showing 2 blocks of code, side by side. On the left, Audra narrated, is my original source code. On the right is the Tantalus protocol. It's just code, Ashton snarled. Run the analysis, Maya, Audra ordered. Maya hit enter. The system began to analyze the new code, not for what it was, but for who wrote it. It analyzed the typing speed, the error rate, the syntax choices, the microsecond hesitations between commands. After 10 seconds, a box popped up on the screen. Analysis complete. Authorship signature. 99.8% confidence. Match. Ashton. Loe. The Aegis' system logged every keystroke, Audra explained, her voice soft. Every late-night session you thought you were being so clever. Every encrypted message you sent to your shell corporation. The system's been tracking you for months, Ashton. You were so busy building a back door, you forgot I built a trap door. She held up a small silver USB drive. And it's all right here. A gift-wrapped confession for the SEC and the FBI. Ashton Lowe did not scream. He did not fight. He simply collapsed. He sank to his knees, his hands covering his face, a broken, sobbing wreck. All the charm, all the bravado, all the stolen light, extinguished in an instant. Ms. Shapiro, Audra said, turning her back on him. I believe the authorities are waiting for him. They are, Shapiro said, nodding to Hines. Wait, Ashton whispered, looking up, his face a mask of tears and shame. Addie, I loved you. You know I did. It just got too big. Audra looked down at him, not with hate, but with a vast, empty pity. No, Ashton, she said. You loved my work. You loved what it could do for you. And you were willing to destroy me to keep it. You just failed. Hines and his men lifted the sobbing ex-CEO to his feet and dragged him into the elevator. The doors closed, and he was gone. For a long minute, the war room was silent, save for the hum of the servers. Audra looked at her new team. David, Maya, and the others were staring at her, their faces pale, but their eyes were full of fire. Audra took a deep breath. She walked to the main console and deleted the countdown clock. All right, she said, rolling up the sleeves of her dress. We have a problem. We have 1,000 bad contracts, a PR nightmare, and a product I wouldn't trust to secure a diary. But the architecture is sound. The idea is sound. She looked at Maya. You, me. We're rebuilding the kernel. From scratch. Tonight. She looked at David. You. Get every investor, every journalist, every client we have on a conference call for 9 Aug AM. Tell them the truth. Tell them Auracor is under new management, and tell them the Aegis they were promised was a lie. David paled. Audra, that will kill us. No, Audra said. It's the only thing that will save us. We're going to launch a new product. Aegis 2.0. My original vision. The Aegis I designed was meant to protect user data, not sell it. We're going to market this as the most secure platform on Earth, because it will be. We're not going to sell features. We're going to sell unhackable. We're going to sell privacy. That was always the vision. She was alive again. The fire that had been banked for a decade was roaring. Her team, seeing the real genius, the real architect, was mesmerized. They weren't just saving a company, they were starting a revolution. Now, Audra said, pulling a whiteboard into the center of the room. Who wants coffee? It's going to be a long night. The next 72 hours were a blur of adrenaline, stale coffee, and the furious clatter of keyboards. The glass-walled war room on the 50th floor became a fortress of innovation. Audra, in the same midnight blue dress, now hopelessly wrinkled, didn't sleep. She didn't eat. She coded. She was not a CEO in a suit. She was an architect in her element. She and Maya, flanked by the remnants of the engineering team, tore down Ashton's compromised Aegis and rebuilt it from the ground up. They worked with a frantic, joyful energy. They were no longer employees. They were artisans, restoring a masterpiece that had been defaced. David Shaw, for his part, became a master of crisis communication. His 9 a.m. call with investors was a bloodbath, but he held the line, using Audra's own words. The old Aura Core is dead. We were built on a lie. The new Aura Core will be built on trust. Give us 48 hours. The press, meanwhile, was having an absolute feeding frenzy. Penelope Dunn's column had exploded across the internet, screenshotted and shared millions of times. The headline, "From Bard to the Boardroom, the real genius of Aura Core reclaims her throne." It had everything. A scorned wife, a public humiliation, a villainous husband, a secret plot, and a last-minute twist. Ashton Lowe's perp walk, looking small and pathetic in his Brioni tuxedo, was the lead image on every news site. Beatrice, the 24-year-old colleague, had vanished, her social media accounts deleted. Inside the war room, Audra was oblivious to the storm. She was solving a problem. She was patching the hole, but more than that, she was fundamentally changing the architecture. "See," she explained, her voice hoarse, pointing to the whiteboard. The flaw was in centralizing the data. Ashton wanted it all in one place so he could sell it. The real Aegis, my Aegis, never lets the user's data leave their device. The Aegis protocol runs locally. It just sends a yes or no token to the server. We don't have their data. We don't want their data. We just protect it. Maya, who hadn't slept in 2 days, looked at her with pure, unadulterated awe. That's revolutionary. That's not just a new product. That's a new philosophy. You're anti-big tech. I'm pro-privacy, Audra corrected, a small smile playing on her lips. It's what I've been trying to build for 12 years. On the third day, Ms. Shapiro returned, looking immaculate. She stepped into the chaotic war room, navigating over sleeping bags and empty energy drink cans. "Audra," she said, her voice soft. "Not now, legal," Audra murmured, her eyes locked on a screen. "Audra." Shapiro put a hand on her shoulder. "It's done." Audra finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "What's done?" "The legal battle. Ashton and his associates have been indicted on multiple counts of wire fraud, conspiracy, and securities fraud. The SEC, the FBI, they are enthusiastic. Good. The settlement is void, naturally, as it was based on fraud. The divorce is being relitigated. All of his, and by extension, the personal assets are frozen." Audra just nodded, her mind still on the code. "Audra, did you hear me?" Shapiro said gently. You're getting everything back. The brownstone, the accounts, all of it. Audra finally pushed back from the console. She stood up, her back cracking. She looked at Shapiro. I don't want it. What? I don't want the brownstone. I don't want his cars. I don't want his art. It's tainted. Audra, that's billions. Sell it, Audra said. Sell all of it. Except... She paused. She walked to the window. The sun was rising, painting the Chicago skyline in hues of pink and orange. Except what? Shapiro asked. My father's note, Audra said, her voice quiet. The $100,000 convertible note. I want that. The original yellow paper. And the diamond studs, the ones I'm wearing. They were my father's last gift. Everything else. Liquidate it. And do what with the money? Shapiro asked, baffled. Audra turned, a fierce, bright light in her exhausted eyes. We're going to start a foundation, the Robert Kendrick Grant for Women in STEM. We're going to find every Audra out there, every quiet genius in a university lab, and we're going to fund them. We're going to make sure they never, ever need a Ashton to sell their ideas. Shapiro was silent for a moment, just watching the woman in front of her. I've been a lawyer for 30 years, she said, her voice thick. You're the first client who's ever made me want to cheer. Audra smiled. Great. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to relaunch a $1 billion company. By Friday. 3 months later, the Zenith Tower looked completely different. The gala's gaudy celestial branding was gone. The lobby, once a cavern of cold marble and ambition, now featured a stunning, living wall of green foliage. It wasn't a gala. It was a press conference. The room was packed, but it wasn't the same crowd. The society columnists and sequined heiresses were gone. This room was filled with serious tech journalists, financial reporters, and federal regulators. The branding on the stage behind the podium was new, simple, and powerful. AuraCore, built on trust, secured by Kendrick. The crowd quieted as Audra walked onto the stage. She was not the same woman who had stood at the velvet rope. There was no severe blue dress, no tight defensive chignon. She wore a sharp, dark teal pantsuit, her dark hair falling in soft, natural waves around her shoulders. She looked strong, confident, and, most shockingly of all, happy. She walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and smiled. Good morning, she said. Her voice, no longer a weapon or a shield, was warm and resonant. 3 months ago, AuraCore was poised to launch a product called Aegis. It was flawed. It was based on a philosophy of exploitation. It was designed, from the ground up, to fail its users. That is not who we are. That is not what I designed. She clicked a remote. The screen behind her showed a simple, elegant diagram of her new, local-first protocol. My father, Robert Kendrick, was an engineer, she said. He once told me that the best security isn't a wall. It's a foundation of trust. Today, we're not just launching a product. We're launching a promise. The Aegis platform is dead. Today, we are launching the Kendrick Protocol. It's the first truly private biometric platform. Your data is yours. It never goes to our servers. It never leaves your device. We don't want it. We can't access it. We just want to protect it. A murmur went through the room. This was a radical, anti-big data idea. It was revolutionary. We're not just a tech company anymore, Audra continued. We are a privacy company, and we are calling on the rest of the industry to join us. The era of data exploitation is over. She opened the floor for questions. A hand from the Wall Street Journal shot up. Ms. Kendrick, a year ago you were Chief Innovation Advisor. Today you're the CEO. What's your first priority? Audra smiled. First, to ensure that our company's code of conduct matches our code of encryption. And second, to give back. Which is why I'm proud to announce that 51% of my personal shares in Aura Core, the 51% that my father's legacy gave me, have been placed in a trust. They are the initial endowment for the Robert Kendrick Grant for Women in STEM. Our first round of funding goes out today to 35 female-led startups. The room erupted in applause. After the conference, Audra bypassed the celebratory champagne. She took the elevator back to the 50th floor. It was no longer a war room. It was the innovation lab. The sterile, blue-lit room was gone. It was bright, open, and chaotic. The walls were covered in whiteboards, filled with equations. Maya, now the official head of R&D, was arguing passionately with David about a new encryption method. Audra walked in, grabbed a marker, and circled a flaw in their logic on the whiteboard. "You're forgetting to account for quantum spin decay," she said, smiling. Maya and David looked at her, then at the board, then back at her. "Oh my God, she's right," David breathed. Audra laughed. She was a leader. She was a mentor. She was an architect. She walked to her office, the same corner office she had been exiled to, the one with the beautiful view. It was no longer a pristine cage. The expensive designer furniture was gone, replaced by a comfortable sofa, more whiteboards, and a framed piece of canary yellow legal paper on the wall. She looked out the window. The view of Chicago was vast and clear. The glass didn't feel like a barrier anymore. It felt like a vantage point. Her phone buzzed. It wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't the press. It was a text from Maya. "Dinner tonight?" "My treat." "You look exhausted." Audra smiled, and for the first time in 12 years, she felt a profound, simple sense of peace. She was not the ghost in the machine. She was not Mrs. Ashton Lowe. She was not the ex-wife. She was Audra Kendrick, and she was, finally, home. And that's the end of Audra's story. What a journey from a humiliating public takedown to the ultimate reclamation of her power. She didn't just win. She changed the entire game. This story shows that sometimes the most devastating betrayal can hide a hidden clause, a loophole that leads you right back to where you belong. What was your favorite moment of her comeback? The reveal in the lobby? The Aegis authorship analysis? Or her launching the foundation? Let me know in the comments below. If you loved this story of justice and vindication, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this video with someone who needs a good story, and most importantly, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We have so many more stories of revenge and triumph to share with you. Thanks for listening. Aidan Devereaux, a man who commanded global markets with a single keystroke, stood in the deafening silence of his penthouse, a single sheet of cream-colored paper, trembling in his hand. His world, once a fortress of predictability and control, had just been leveled by a ghost. She was gone. Noel, the vibrant soul who had painted color into his monochrome existence, had vanished, leaving behind only this letter and a scent of lavender that was already starting to fade. The note offered no explanation, no destination, just a heart-wrenching goodbye. For months, he hunted for a phantom, deploying the full might of his fortune to find a woman who didn't want Tor to be found. He thought he had lost her forever until a chance encounter in an airport terminal brought him face to face with a truth more shocking than her disappearance. Aidan Devereaux lived a life measured in data points and stock valuations. His company, Nexus Dynamics, was at the forefront of predictive AI, and his personal fortune was a figure so vast it had become an abstraction. His penthouse, A glass-walled marvel overlooking the sprawling city of San Francisco was less a home and more a monument to his success. Every surface was sleek, every corner was calculated, and every object had its place. It was a world of perfect, sterile order. And then there was Noelle Winters. She was the beautiful, chaotic variable in his otherwise flawless equation. He had met her at a charity gala he'd been strong-armed into attending. While others buzzed around him, eager to pitch their next venture, she stood by a window sketching the city lights in a small, worn-out notebook, utterly oblivious to the power circulating in the room. She was a painter, an artist whose hands were perpetually smudged with charcoal and cobalt blue. She saw the world not in numbers, but in hues and textures. For Aidan, she was intoxicating. She was the one thing he couldn't predict, the one asset he couldn't acquire through a hostile takeover. He pursued her with the same relentless focus he applied to his business dealings. He showered her with gifts. She never asked for a rare set of sable brushes from Germany, a private tour of the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, a custom-built studio in the penthouse with a northern-facing window that bathed the room in perfect soft light. He thought he was giving her the world. In reality, he was building her the most beautiful cage imaginable. "You don't need to sell your work at those little street fairs anymore, my love," he'd said one evening, gesturing around her new state-of-the-art studio. "I can support you. You can paint for yourself for us." Noelle had forced a smile, the light in her hazel eyes dimming just a little. "But Aidan," she'd said softly, "the joy is in the sharing. It's seeing someone connect with a piece, knowing it's going to a home where it will be loved." He didn't understand. To him, her art was a hobby, a charming quirk. He loved her, of that he was certain, but his love was possessive. He saw her as the masterpiece of his collection. He would proudly show her off at corporate events, his arm firmly around her waist. "This is Noelle," he would say. "She's an artist." But he never talked about her art, only about her beauty, her grace. He curated her life, suggesting what she should wear, who she should befriend, gently steering her away from her bohemian art school friends and towards the polished, vapid wives of his business associates. The signs of her retreat were subtle at first. The canvases in her studio began to gather dust. She stopped humming as she mixed her paints. The laughter that had once echoed through the sterile halls of the penthouse grew infrequent, replaced by a quiet, pervasive melancholy that Aidan, in his self-absorbed bubble of success, failed to truly notice. He was too busy conquering the world to see that he was losing the one person who made it worth living in. The morning it happened was like any other. He woke before dawn, his mind already churning through algorithms and market projections. Noelle was asleep beside him, her dark hair fanned out across the 1,000-thread-count Egyptian cotton pillow. He'd kissed her forehead, a perfunctory gesture, before heading to his home office. He spent the next 3 hours in a flurry of international calls and data analysis. When he finally emerged ready for the breakfast, his private chef would have prepared, the penthouse was still. Too still. "Noelle," he called out, his voice echoing in the vast, empty space. There was no answer. He walked through the living area, past the minimalist furniture and priceless sculptures to her studio. The door was ajar. He pushed it open, and his blood ran cold. The easels were bare. The brushes were cleaned and stored away. The vibrant chaos of her creative space had been replaced by an unnerving tidiness. It was sterile, just like the rest of his apartment. It was as if she had been scrubbed from the room from his life. Then he saw it. Propped up against a bottle of turpentine on her workbench was a single folded sheet of cream-colored stationery. His name was written on the front in her elegant, flowing script. With a sense of dread coiling in his stomach, he picked it up. His hands, usually so steady during multi-billion-dollar negotiations, trembled as he unfolded the letter. My dearest Aidan, if you are reading this, it means I have finally found the courage to leave. Please do not try to find me. This is not your fault, not in the way you might think. You gave me everything a woman could ever want, everything except the one thing I truly need myself. In your world of perfect lines and calculated outcomes, I have become a ghost. The woman you met, the one with paint under her fingernails and dreams in her eyes, has faded away. I look in the mirror, and I no longer recognize the person staring back. I am a beautiful object in a beautiful cage, and my soul is suffocating. I love you. A part of me will always love the man who showed me the stars from a private jet. But I need to find the woman who was content to sketch them from a park bench. I need to be messy to struggle to create something that is honest and raw and entirely my own. Please live your life. Be the king of your empire. But let me go. Forever yours in a way, Noel. He read it once, twice, a dozen times. The words blurred, the ink seeming to mock him. It made no sense. He had given her everything. He had protected her, provided for her. How could she call it a cage? He stormed back into the bedroom. Her closet was half empty. The simple paint-splattered jeans and worn t-shirts were gone. All that remained were the designer gowns and couture dresses he had bought for her. She had shed the skin he had given her and vanished. The silence of the penthouse pressed in on him a physical weight. Aidan Devereaux, the man who could find anyone, anywhere, using the most advanced technology on the planet, had just lost the one person who mattered, and he had no idea where to even begin looking. The first 24 hours were a blur of disbelief and fury. Aidan's immediate instinct was to treat Noel's disappearance as a problem to be solved, a hostile variable to be brought back under his control. He didn't call the police. This was a private matter, a stain on his perfect reputation that he would handle internally. He first called Ben Carter, his chief operating officer, and the closest thing he had to a friend. Ben was a pragmatic, level-headed man who had been with Aidan since the early days of Nexus Dynamics, a grounding force against Aidan's often maniacal ambition. She's gone. Ben. Aidan's voice was clipped, devoid of the emotion churning inside him. Left a note. I need you to pull a team. I want every private investigator worth his salt on this. I want her digital footprint, analyzed, her financials tracked. No expense spared. Ben arrived at the penthouse within the hour, finding Aidan pacing like a caged panther amidst the pristine, white furniture. He read the letter, his expression grim. Aidan. This isn't a kidnapping, Ben said, carefully, holding up the note. She left. She's asking you to let her go. She doesn't know what she's asking for. Aidan snapped, snatching the letter back. The world out there, it's not safe for her. She's delicate. I was protecting her. Were you protecting her? Or possessing her? Ben asked, his voice low. It was a question no one else dared to ask Aidan Devereaux. Aidan's jaw tightened. Find her, Ben. That's an order. The search began with overwhelming force. Aidan's hand-picked team of elite investigators, men and women, usually hired to track down corporate spies or locate hidden assets in offshore accounts, were now tasked with finding one missing artist. They were efficient and ruthless. They discovered that Noel had withdrawn $5,000 in cash the maximum daily limit from her personal bank account the day before she left. It was an account Aidan hadn't even known. She'd kept open a small relic from her life before him. After that withdrawal, the trail went cold. She hadn't used a credit card. She hadn't boarded a plane, a train, or a bus under her own name. Her cell phone was found in a trash can 2 blocks from the penthouse, wiped clean. She had systematically and methodically erased herself. "She's a ghost," said the lead investigator. "A former MI6 agent named Kincaid after a week of fruitless searching. She's either had professional help or she's far more resourceful than you gave her credit for." Aidan refused to accept it. He had Nexus Dynamics' data analysts build an algorithm to search for her. They scoured social media searching for mentions for photos posted by friends for any trace of her online. They came up with nothing. Her old friends, the artists and poets he had subtly pushed out of her life, were contacted. They were fiercely loyal. Most claimed not to have heard from her in months. A few simply hung up. Weeks turned into a month, then 2. Aidan's obsession grew. He became a wraith in his own company. His focus fractured. During board meetings, his eyes would be glued to his tablet, scrolling through security footage from bus stations and airports, searching for a ghost in the machine. His empire built on precision and foresight began to show cracks. He missed a key deadline on a government contract costing the company millions. He snapped at his most loyal employees, his temper frayed and unpredictable. Ben Carter watched his friend's descent with growing alarm. "Aidan, you have to stop this," he pleaded one night, finding Aidan asleep in his office, the glow of a dozen monitors illuminating his gaunt face. "You're destroying yourself. You're destroying the company." "I can build another company." Aidan rasped, his voice raw with exhaustion. I can't replace her." For the first time, the mask of the ruthless billionaire cracked, revealing the desperate man beneath. "I don't understand, Ben." He whispered, his head in his hands. "I gave her everything." "You gave her things, Aidan," Ben corrected gently. "You gave her objects, security, a lifestyle. You never gave her space. You never gave her the freedom to be herself. You loved the idea of Noelle, the beautiful artist who completed your perfect life. Did you ever truly love Noelle?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered. Aidan had no response. He had seen her as his greatest acquisition, and now she was the one asset that had depreciated to zero, vanishing from his portfolio. The world he had built, a world where anything could be bought, tracked or controlled, had failed him. Noelle Winters, with nothing but a few $1,000s and a will of iron, had outmaneuvered him completely. After 3 months, with every lead exhausted and his own life and company in disarray, Aidan finally called off the official search. He told Kincaid and his team to stand down. He told Ben he was refocusing on the company. But in the dead of night, he would still find himself scrolling through old photos of her, listening to her favorite classical music, and walking into her empty, silent studio, hoping to catch a lingering trace of her scent. He had given up the hunt, but he hadn't given up the ghost. He had simply resigned himself to being haunted. 6 months after Noelle vanished, a fragile truce had settled over Aidan's life. He had thrown himself back into his work, with a vengeance, the familiar logic of code and capital, a soothing balm on his wounded pride. He worked punishing hours, sealing deals and launching new products, burying his grief under layers of success. Nexus Dynamics soared to new heights, but its CEO was a hollow man. The laughter lines around his eyes had been replaced by the hard set of someone who had lost something irreplaceable. He was richer than ever, and more alone than he had ever been in his life. The breakthrough came, as they so often do not, in a boardroom or a data center, but in a moment of mundane transit. Aiden was at San Francisco International Airport, waiting for a flight to Tokyo for a critical negotiation with a tech conglomerate. His flight was delayed, and he found himself restlessly pacing the terminal. The sterile environment, the anonymous crowds, the sense of being between places, it all mirrored his own internal state. He stopped at a newsstand to buy a bottle of water, his eyes scanning the racks of magazines without interest. Business journals, celebrity gossip rags, political weeklies. Then his gaze snagged on a title he would normally never notice Artisan's horizon. It was a prestigious high-end art publication, the kind Noel used to read religiously. He wasn't sure what made him look closer. Perhaps it was a flicker of memory, a subconscious pull towards her world. But what he saw on the cover made the air leave his lungs in a sudden, sharp gasp. It was a painting, a stunning, brutally honest portrait of a woman with her back to the viewer standing in a gilded cage. Sunlight streamed through the golden bars, illuminating a single outstretched hand, reaching for a window that looked out onto a simple wildflower-strewn field. The technique was masterful, the emotion visceral. It was a painting of profound longing, of beautiful imprisonment. And he recognized the style instantly. The bold brushstrokes, the way she captured light, the raw emotion bleeding through the canvas. It was Noel's, unmistakably hers. His heart hammered against his ribs. But it wasn't just the painting that held him captive. Below the magazine's masthead, in elegant serif font, was the headline, "Anya, the enigmatic new voice of modern art. Her secretive rise, and the masterpiece that's taking the world by storm." Next to the headline was a photograph, a professional black-and-white shot of the artist. The woman in the photo was leaning against a paint-splattered wall, a small, confident smile on her lips. Her hair was cut shorter styled, in a way that was chic and modern. She wore simple dark clothing, a stark contrast to the designer labels he had dressed her in. She looked different, stronger, more self-possessed, a spark of defiance in her eyes that he hadn't seen in years. But there was no mistaking her face. The high cheekbones, the curve of her lips, the constellation of freckles across her nose. It was Noel. He snatched the magazine from the rack, his hands shaking so violently he nearly dropped it. He fumbled for his wallet, threw a $100 bill on the counter without waiting for change, and stumbled towards the nearest seating area. He collapsed into a chair, his mind reeling. He frantically flipped to the cover story. The article was a breathless piece of art journalism hailing the mysterious artist, known only as Anya, as a once-in-a-generation talent. She had appeared on the scene out of nowhere a few months prior, represented by the legendary Parisian gallery owner, Geneviève Dubois. Her first exhibition, titled The Escape, had sold out within an hour, with collectors and museums clamoring to acquire her work. The painting on the cover, Gilded, was her most famous piece, already being lauded as a modern masterpiece. The article was sparse on personal details. It said Anya was fiercely private, refusing interviews and public appearances, letting her work speak for itself. It mentioned she had emerged from a period of profound personal transformation, and that her art explored themes of identity freedom and the struggle to reclaim one's voice. Aiden read the words, but they barely registered. All he could see was her face, her painting. Anya. She had created a new name, a new identity. She hadn't just run away. She had been reborn, and she had done it all without him. Not only was she surviving, she was thriving. She was a success on a global scale in the very world he had so casually dismissed. The anger and confusion that had plagued him for months began to curdle into something else, something he couldn't name. It was a bitter cocktail of awe, jealousy, and a profound, aching sense of loss. The woman he had seen as a delicate flower to be kept in his greenhouse had proven to be a resilient wildflower, capable of growing in the harshest terrain. The final boarding call for his flight to Tokyo echoed through the terminal. But Aiden didn't move. The billion-dollar deal, the future of his company. It all seemed insignificant. His world had just been recontextualized. His ghost had a new name. And she wasn't just a phantom from his past. She was the headline of the present. The hunt wasn't over. It had just begun again. But this time he wasn't looking for a lost lover. He was looking for Anya. The Tokyo deal was a disaster. Aiden went through the motions, his body present in the sterile Japanese boardroom, but his mind was thousands of miles away, lost in the brushstrokes of a painting on a magazine cover. He was distracted, unfocused, and his counterparts, the shrewd executives of the Maruyama Corporation, sensed his weakness. They ran circles around him in the negotiations. For the first time in his professional life, Aiden Devereaux was outplayed. He walked away with a fraction of the deal he had expected a failure that would have crippled him a year ago. Now he barely registered it. He flew back to San Francisco immediately, the Artisan's Horizon magazine, his constant companion. He had read the article about Anya so many times the pages were soft and worn. He cancelled his appointments, cleared his schedule, and turned the full obsessive force of his intellect onto a new target, the international art world. It was a world completely alien to him. It operated not on logic and data, but on taste, on influence, on whispers and connections. It was a labyrinth of critics, collectors, curators, and gallery owners, and at its center was the woman he was looking for. His first step was to contact Genevieve Dubois, the Parisian gallery owner mentioned in the article. He had his assistant get her on the line, expecting his name to grant him immediate access. Monsieur Devereaux, a cool, accented voice said over the speakerphone. To what do I owe the pleasure, Ms. Dubois? Aiden began, his tone clipped and all business. I'm calling about the artist you represent, Anya. I have a professional interest in acquiring her work, and in meeting her. There was a slight pause. Anya's collection is sold out for the foreseeable future, monsieur, and she does not meet with collectors. She values her privacy above all else. If you wish to be placed on a waiting list, which is currently several years long, I can have my assistant take your information. I think you misunderstand, Aiden said, a hard edge to his voice. I'm not just any collector. I am prepared to pay a significant premium. Genevieve Dubois laughed a sound like ice cubes clinking in a crystal glass. Monsieur, my clients do not care about a significant premium. They care about art. Anya's work is not a commodity to be traded like your tech stocks. It is a voice, and it is not for sale to just anyone. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have another call. The line went dead. Aiden stared at the phone, stunned. He had been dismissed. He who could summon world leaders to a call had been casually brushed off by a Parisian art dealer. It was infuriating, and yet a small part of him felt a grudging respect. Noelle Anya had found herself a formidable guardian. Fine. If he couldn't get through the front door, he would find another way in. He began to educate himself. He hired art consultants, devouring books on modern art history. He spent his nights not analyzing market trends, but studying the works of Rothko Pollock and Carlo, trying to understand the language Noel was speaking. He started attending gallery openings and high-end art auctions events he had always sneered at. He was awkward and out of place, a shark in a tank of exotic fish. He moved through the crowds of eccentric artists and effete critics, listening, learning, gathering information. He bought art, not for investment but to build a reputation as a serious collector. He bought a sculpture by a rising star from Berlin, a controversial installation from a Korean artist. He overheard in the art world gossips whispered about the nouveau riche tech baron trying to buy taste. He didn't care. It was all a means to an end. Through his new connections, he started to piece together Anya's story. He learned that Geneviève Dubois had discovered her in a small street-side gallery in Lisbon, Portugal. She had been painting under a different name, then selling small canvases to tourists. Geneviève had seen her genius, immediately taken her under her wing, and helped her create the Anya persona to protect her from a difficult past. A difficult past. The phrase echoed in his mind. He was her difficult past. As he delved deeper, he began to see his own reflection in her work. He acquired through a secondary dealer, and at an exorbitant price, one of her earlier, smaller pieces from the Escape collection. It was titled Hatul Echo Hatul Chaswu Chamber. It depicted a beautiful room with glass walls filled with priceless objects. But the room had no doors, and the man inside, a featureless silhouette, was staring at his own reflection, oblivious to the world outside. He hung the painting in his office directly across from his desk. He would stare at it for hours. For the first time, he started to understand. He hadn't just stifled her. He had been living in his own prison, an echo chamber of his own making, and he had tried to pull her inside with him. The art was her letter, written in a language far more powerful than words. Each brushstroke was an accusation, a declaration of independence, a piece of her soul she was reclaiming. His obsession shifted. The initial furious desire to reclaim his possession was slowly, painfully being replaced by a genuine need to understand the woman she had become. He wasn't just hunting for Noel anymore. He was trying to decipher Anya. He used his tech resources not to find her location, but to track the provenance of her pieces, to analyze the critical reviews, to build a complete picture of her new world. Finally, after weeks of relentless networking and strategic acquisitions, he got a break. A collector he had recently done business with mentioned that Geneviève Dubois was hosting an exclusive invitation-only salon in her private villa in Lake Como, Italy, to unveil Anya's newest work to a handful of her most elite clients. Getting an invitation was impossible, so Aidan did what he did best. He didn't try to get an invitation. He bought the access. He discovered that the catering company for the event was a subsidiary of a larger hospitality group. A few strategically placed calls and a very significant investment in that group. Later, Aidan Devereux was on the guest list, not as a collector, but as a silent partner of the event's benefactor. He booked a flight to Milan. He was finally going to get past the gatekeeper. He was going to see her work her world. And maybe, just maybe, he would see her. The prospect was both terrifying and exhilarating. He was stepping out of his echo chamber and into the labyrinth she had created. The Villa d'Este on Lake Como was a world away from the cold, hard angles of Silicon Valley. It was a place of old-world elegance of cypress trees and fragrant gardenias, where the gentle lapping of the water against the stone balustrades provided a soothing soundtrack. This was the world Noel had chosen, a world of beauty and history that made his glass and steel penthouse feel like a futuristic prison. Aidan arrived feeling like an imposter. He was dressed in a bespoke Italian suit, looking every bit the billionaire. But internally he was a nervous wreck. He walked through the villa's opulent gardens, where the exclusive guests were mingling with champagne. He recognized faces from the upper echelons of society, an aging European royal, a shipping magnate, a celebrated film director. They all spoke in hushed, reverent tones about Anya. He saw Geneviève Dubois holding court near a fountain, a vision of Parisian chic in a simple black dress and a string of pearls. She was formidable, her eyes sharp and intelligent, missing nothing. Aidan avoided her gaze, keeping to the periphery, an observer in a world he did not belong to. The main event was the unveiling of a single new painting held in the villa's grand salon. The guests were ushered inside, their voices dropping to whispers. The room was dimly lit with a single large canvas standing on an easel in the center, covered by a sheet of dark velvet. Geneviève stepped forward. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice commanding the room. "As you know, Anya guards her privacy as it is the well from which her incredible talent springs. She prefers to let her work communicate on her behalf. Tonight, we have the honor of witnessing her latest statement, a piece she has titled The Architect. Two assistants pulled away the velvet cloth. A collective gasp went through the room. Aidan felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. The painting was a portrait. It was a man, seated in a vast, empty office high above a city. His face was in shadow, his features indistinct, but the posture, the powerful set of his shoulders, the expensive cut of his suit. It was unmistakably him. He was holding a small, delicate songbird in his open palm. Staring down at it, not with affection, but with the cold, analytical gaze of a scientist studying a specimen. The bird was beautiful, but its wings were clipped. It could not fly. It was a devastating, heart-breakingly beautiful indictment. It was his portrait, painted by the woman who knew him best. He stood frozen, the blood roaring in his ears. The crowd around him murmured in appreciation, dissecting the technique, the symbolism, the bold critique of patriarchal power structures. They saw a concept. He saw his soul laid bare on a canvas for the world to see. He had to get out. He turned and blindly pushed his way out of the salon, back into the cool night air of the garden. He stumbled towards the edge of the terrace, overlooking the dark, placid lake, his hands gripping the stone railing, his knuckles white. Ben's words from months ago came back to him. Were you protecting her or possessing her? This painting was her answer. It's a difficult thing, isn't it? To see yourself as others see you. The voice was soft, familiar, yet different. It had a new strength, a new resonance. He turned slowly. Noelle stood there a few feet away, partially hidden in the shadows of a cypress tree. She wasn't Anya, the mysterious art world phenom. She was just Noelle. Dressed in simple black trousers and a silk blouse, she looked ethereal in the moonlight. The fear and uncertainty he remembered from her last few months with him were gone, replaced by a calm, unwavering confidence. Noelle. He breathed her name. It felt foreign on his tongue. Hello, Aidan, she said, her expression unreadable. I had a feeling you'd find a way to be here. You were never one to accept a locked door. The painting. He started, his voice cracking. I didn't realize. No, she said, taking a step closer. You didn't. You saw a beautiful songbird, and you wanted its song to be only for you. So you built it a beautiful cage and couldn't understand why it stopped singing. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart piercing through the armor of denial he had worn for so long. "I loved you," he said, the words feeling hollow, inadequate. "You loved the way I made you feel," she corrected him gently. "You loved the idea of me, the quiet, gentle artist who made your perfect world feel a little more human. But you didn't want the messy parts, Aidan. You didn't want the struggle, the doubt, the paint-stained chaos that is essential to who I am. You tried to clean me up, to frame me and hang me on your wall. But I'm not a painting. I'm the artist." He had no defense. She was right. He saw it all now with sickening clarity. His grand, romantic gestures were acts of control. His protection was a form of suffocation. "I'm sorry." He whispered the apology, feeling like a tiny pebble against the mountain of his arrogance. "I was a fool." "Yes, you were," she agreed without malice. "But so was I. I let it happen. I let myself fade away because I was so dazzled by your world. I forgot that I had a world of my own, one that I needed to build for myself." She looked out over the lake. "I had to vanish, Aidan. I had to destroy Noel Winters so that Anya could be born. I had to learn to survive on my own, to trust my own voice. And I have." He stood there, stripped of all his power and wealth. In this garden, under the Italian moon, he was not the CEO of Nexus Dynamics. He was just a man who had broken the most precious thing in his life and was only now understanding the cost. "What now?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Do you hate me?" Noelle looked back at him, a flicker of the old warmth in her eyes. "No, Aidan, I don't hate you. In a way, I should thank you. You were the cage I had to escape to learn how to fly. I have my work, my voice, my freedom. I am finally me." She paused, her gaze steady. "The question is, without me, without your perfect acquisition, who are you?" She didn't wait for an answer. She simply turned and walked back towards the villa, melting back into the shadows, leaving him alone on the terrace with the ghost of the man he used to be and the devastating masterpiece that bore his likeness. The flight back from Italy was the longest of Aidan's life. He didn't work. He didn't read. He just stared out the window at the endless expanse of clouds, the reflection of a stranger staring back at him from the glass. Noelle. His final question echoed in his mind, a relentless drumbeat against the hum of the jet engines. Who are you? He had always defined himself by his success, his wealth, his control. He was the architect of an empire. But Noelle's painting, The Architect, had shown him the truth. He was the architect of a prison, and he himself was its chief inmate. His life was as curated and soulless as the penthouse he called home. When he landed in San Francisco, he didn't go to the office. He went straight to the penthouse and walked into her old studio. It was still clean, still sterile, just as she'd left it. He looked at the perfect northern light, the expensive unused equipment. He had given her a perfect space to work, but had denied her the inspiration, the messy, chaotic, beautiful struggle of life. Then he went to his office and stood before Echo Chamber, the painting he had bought. He saw himself in the featureless silhouette, trapped in his own reflection, unable to see out. He had to tear it all down. The next day, he walked into a Nexus Dynamics board meeting and did the unthinkable. He announced he was stepping down as CEO. The room erupted in chaos. Board members, investors he had known for years looked at him as if he had lost his mind. His rival, Connor Reed, who held a minority stake, looked positively gleeful. "I've become a bottleneck," Aidan explained, his voice calm and steady in the storm of their protests. "This company was founded on innovation, on seeing the world differently, and I've lost that perspective. I've been living in an echo chamber." He nominated Ben Carter as his successor. "Ben has always been the heart of this company. It's time he became its head." The board fought him, but Aidan was resolute. He was the majority shareholder. His decision was final. He walked away from the company he had built from nothing, leaving a tremor in the foundations of the tech world. His next act was even more shocking to his social circle. He sold the penthouse. He put it on the market for a fraction of its value, wanting only to be rid of it, to shed the skin of the man who had lived there. He moved into a small, unassuming apartment in a different part of the city, one with no view to speak of. He began systematically dismantling his old life. He sold his collection of supercars, his private jet, his portfolio of flashy, empty properties. He felt a lightness with each possession he shed. He was demolishing the gilded Kaj bar by bar, but what to build in its place? He thought of Noelle's passion, the joy she took in her work, a joy he had never truly felt, even at the height of his success. His work had been about winning, about conquering. Hers was about creating, about connecting. With a significant portion of his fortune, he established a new foundation. He called it the Winter's Grant, in honor of the name she had shed. It was a foundation dedicated to supporting emerging artists, the ones who were struggling, the ones with raw, unpolished talent, who were still selling their work at street fairs and in small, unknown galleries. The grant would provide them with funding, studio space, and mentorship, not to control them, but to give them the freedom to create, without the burden of financial desperation. He threw himself into this new project with a focus he hadn't felt in years. But this time, it wasn't about power or profit. He met with young artists, visited their cramped, chaotic studios. He listened to them talk about their dreams and their fears. He learned to see the world through their eyes, in hues and textures, in light and shadow. He saw the passion he had tried to extinguish in Noelle, burning brightly in them, and his mission became to protect that flame, not to cage it. He made no attempt to contact Noelle. He knew this wasn't about winning her back. This was about becoming a man who was worthy of the apology he still owed her. He followed her career from a distance. Anya became a global phenomenon. Her exhibitions in London, Tokyo, and New York were legendary. Her paintings sold for millions. She was a powerful, commanding voice in the art world, and he felt a quiet, profound sense of pride. He had been the catalyst for her transformation, the darkness that had forced her to find her own light. Months turned into a year. Aidan Devereux. The tech titan faded from the headlines, replaced by quiet stories about the reclusive philanthropist behind the Winter's Grant. He was a different man. He was quieter, more thoughtful. He learned to find joy not in acquisition, but in contribution. He was no longer the architect of an empire. He was a humble builder, trying to lay a new foundation for a different kind of life. He was finally answering her question. He was discovering who he was. 2 years after that fateful night in Lake Como, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art announced its most anticipated exhibition in a decade, Anya, a Voice, Uncaged, the artist's first major retrospective in the United States. The news spread through the art world like wildfire. It was more than an exhibition. It was a coronation, a triumphant homecoming for the enigmatic genius who had appeared from nowhere and redefined the landscape of contemporary art. Aidan learned of it, not from the society pages, but through an official letter addressed to the Winter's Grant. The museum was proposing a partnership for the opening night gala, with all proceeds from the benefit to be directed to his foundation. The irony was a physical blow so sharp and precise, it almost made him laugh. The institution celebrating her freedom wanted to partner with the foundation he'd named after the identity. She'd shed an identity he himself had nearly erased. He accepted without hesitation. This was never about him. It was about her, and it was about the artists his foundation existed to support. The night of the gala arrived draped in a cool San Francisco fog. Aidan stood for a long moment in his simple apartment, adjusting the knot on a dark conservative tie. He was not the same man who had once commanded rooms like this. That man would have arrived with an entourage, would have expected the sea of people to part for him. Tonight, Aidan dreaded the entrance. He knew she would be there. It was her moment, her masterpiece of a life, on full display. He had no right to cast his shadow over it. His plan was simple: make his speech represent the foundation, and then like a ghost slip out before she ever took the stage. The museum was a symphony of controlled chaos. The clinking of champagne flutes, the murmur of 100 conversations, the flash of cameras. It was a world he once navigated with predatory ease. Now he felt like a foreigner. He bypassed the main reception, slipping into the exhibition halls before they became crowded. He needed to see it. He needed to walk the path of her journey alone. The exhibition was laid out chronologically, a visual autobiography that tore the breath from his lungs. The first room was filled with her early work pieces from before they met. They were vibrant, joyful landscapes of the California coast, alive with a raw, uninhibited love for the world. He saw the woman he first met in those canvases, the one with paint under her fingernails and dreams in her eyes. Then he turned a corner and entered the next chapter. His chapter. The colors muted, the lines grew tighter, more constrained. He saw studies of opulent empty rooms. He saw still lifes of beautiful objects shrouded in shadow. And then he was standing before them, gilded, the painting of the woman in the cage that had stopped his world in an airport terminal, and echo chamber wall, the piece he had once owned, showing the featureless man trapped by his own reflection. Seeing them here under the museum's perfect lighting, surrounded by admiring strangers, was a surreal form of public flagellation. They were not just paintings, they were evidence. They were her truth displayed for all to see. He kept walking, his heart a leaden weight in his chest, and found himself before the architect. It was even more powerful in person. He stood before the massive canvas, studying the man in the shadowed office, holding the bird with the clipped wings. 2 years ago, it had felt like an accusation. Tonight he saw it with a strange, aching sense of detachment. He was looking at a portrait of a man who no longer existed. It wasn't an attack. It was a diagnosis of a soul he had since put into recovery. He felt a profound sense of sorrow for that man, for the profound loneliness he must have felt in that glass tower. He finally understood. The final rooms of the exhibition were an explosion. They were the works of Anya. The canvases were huge, the colors were defiant, the forms were abstract and powerful and utterly free. They were paintings about resilience, about rebirth, about the ferocious beauty of a voice, uncaged. He walked through the space, a quiet, profound pride swelling within him, eclipsing the shame. He had been the catalyst, the unforgivable pressure that had turned a piece of coal into the most brilliant of diamonds. A gentle chime announced that the evening's formal program was beginning. Aidan made his way to the main hall, his composure a carefully constructed mask. He stood at the side of the stage, waiting for his turn, watching the museum director sing Anya's praises. Then his name was called. He walked to the podium, the spotlight feeling less like a recognition and more like an interrogation. He looked out at the sea of faces, cleared his throat, and began to speak. "Good evening." He started, his voice steady and clear. "I am here tonight on behalf of the Winter's Grant. We are honored to partner with this museum in celebrating a truly singular artist." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. "Art is not a luxury, it is a necessity. It is the language of the soul. But for a soul to speak, it must be free. It cannot be caged, it cannot be curated, and it cannot be controlled. The mission of our foundation is simple: to find gifted artists and give them the one thing they need most, the freedom to find their own voice, to be messy, to fail, to struggle, and ultimately to create something honest." He saw a few faces in the crowd register the name Winters, a flicker of understanding in their eyes. He didn't mention her directly. He didn't need to. Her presence, her story, was in every word he spoke. "Thank you for supporting that mission." The applause was warm, respectful. As soon as he stepped off the podium, he began a swift, direct path toward the exit. He had done his part. He had kept his promise to himself. Not going to stay for the main event. The voice was a soft melody that cut through the noise of the gala. It stopped him dead in his tracks. He turned slowly. Noelle was standing there, just behind a large marble pillar, the shadows partially cloaking her. She was breathtaking. A simple, elegant, dark blue gown fell around her, its color the shade of a twilight sky. The fierce, defiant artist from the magazine cover and the quiet, haunted woman from his memories had merged into something new. The confidence he had seen in Italy had deepened, now softened by a warmth in her eyes. He thought he had destroyed forever. "It's your night," he said, his voice quiet, almost hoarse. "I didn't want to be a distraction." A small, genuine smile touched her lips. "Aidan Devereux, trying not to be a distraction." She teased gently, the sound light and free. "Now I know you've changed." They stood in a pocket of stillness, the swirling gala a world away. The silence between them wasn't awkward or heavy with unspoken things. It was calm, contemplative. "The foundation," she began, her voice losing its playful edge, becoming soft and sincere. "The Winter's Grant. That was you." It wasn't a question. He could only nod, his throat tight. "I wanted to build something, not just own things," he managed to say. "You taught me that." "It's helped so many young artists," she said, her gaze steady and searching. "People who were just like I was. You've done a good thing, Aidan. A truly good thing." "I had to," he replied, the words coming from a place of deep, settled truth. "I owed a debt to the woman whose name I used." She looked at him, then truly looked at him, and he felt as if she could see the entire grueling journey of the past 2 years etched on his face. She saw the demolition and the slow, difficult reconstruction. "The debt is paid," she said, finally, her voice imbued with a quiet absolution. She tilted her head slightly. "Look at you. The last time I saw you, you looked haunted. Tonight, you seem happy." "I'm content," he corrected, the distinction vital. "I'm at peace. And you?" "I'm free," she said, and her smile was radiant, a masterpiece all its own. "And I'm home." An announcement came over the speakers, the museum director's voice booming as he invited Anya to the stage. This was it, her moment, the culmination of her escape, her fight, her victory. "I should go," she said, turning slightly toward the stage. "Noelle." He said the name, leaving his lips before he could stop it. She turned back. "I am so incredibly proud of you." He saw tears well in her eyes, shimmering under the gallery lights, but she blinked them back with the strength he now knew so well. "Thank you, Aidan." She hesitated for just a beat, a moment, where a dozen different histories and futures seemed to hang in the balance. Then she did something he never expected. She reached out and briefly, gently squeezed his hand. The touch was warm, real, and utterly devoid of the past. "Maybe," she said softly, her voice just for him. "After the noise dies down, we could get a coffee. As friends. I'd like to meet the man who runs the Winter's Grant." With that, she let go, turned and walked out from behind the pillar, stepping into the blinding lights and the thunderous, roaring applause of the crowd. Aidan stood in the shadows, watching her go. He watched as she took the stage, not as a victim, not as his creation, but as a queen taking her throne. He didn't feel a sting of loss or a pang of regret. All he felt was an overwhelming sense of rightness. The songbird he had once kicked was now soaring her song, filling the world, and he finally was content to simply stand on the ground and watch her fly. A genuine, unforced smile spread across his face for the first time in years. He turned and walked away from the light out of the museum and into the quiet, fog-laced promise of his own new beginning. And so Aidan and Noelle's story comes to a close, not with a fairy tale ending, but with something far more real, the promise of a new, honest beginning. Their journey teaches us a powerful lesson about love identity and the danger of trying to own someone's soul. It shows that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go, and the most important discovery you can make is finding out who you are when everything you've built comes crashing down. It's a reminder that true wealth isn't measured in dollars or possessions, but in freedom, purpose, and the courage to change. If this story of karmic retribution and profound transformation moved you, please let us know by hitting that like button. Your support helps us bring more tales like this to you. Share this video with someone who loves a story about second chances, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell. We have a world of stories waiting for you, and we can't wait to share them. Thank you for listening.